rain streaked the clinic's windows, turning the neon open sign into a smudge of light that flickered against peeling paint. A small, tired woman pressed her forehead to the glass, counting the cars swishing past outside. Her reflection stared back, dark circles, hair pulled into a quick bun with a faded scrunchie, her father's doctor's necklace glinting at her collar like a secret. Inside, silence clung to the vinyl seats and battered waiting room table. She moved through the place in slow circuits, lifting bills from the doorframe, stacking old magazines, tugging open drawers only to find more reminders of debt. A pink plastic lunchbox, her daughter's with glitter scraped off, sat beside a rusted coffee pot on the counter. It was packed for another night at the warehouse. Peanut butter sandwich, bruised apple, a handful of loose change for the vending machine. A pair of rain boots thudded in the hallway. "Mom, it smells like Band-Aids in here," a small voice said. 8 years old, knees smudged from schoolyard dirt, hair wild and half unraveled from the wind. She hopped from tile to tile, rubber soles squeaking. Her mother didn't answer. She gathered a handful of overdue notices, red stamps, thick envelopes, and tucked them into her coat. Each one was a warning. Final notice, utilities pending, foreclosure imminent. On the exam table, a torn teddy bear waited for stitches. Her daughter fished through drawers, unearthing a wooden box, its hinges worn to silver. She pried at the lid, tongue poking between her teeth. "It's just more junk, Mom. Why not sell it all?" The girl dropped the box on the desk with a thud. Her mother's hands stilled. She reached into her pocket, fingers closing over the doctor's necklace, a pendant with the caduceus, cool and solid, worn smooth at the edges. The only thing her father had never taken off, not even in sleep. The box's clasp caught the overhead light as she flicked it open. A hush settled. Inside, a tangle of brittle documents, receipts, prescription pads, papers yellowed by coffee stains and time. Wedged beneath was something stranger, a folded sketch of a device, lines dense and purposeful, annotated in cramped handwriting she'd memorized as a child. Her father's name in the corner, half rubbed away. Rain ratcheted against the window. She traced a finger along the sketch's edge, the paper soft from years in hiding. On the back, a list of numbers, nearly illegible. Patent codes, or just another list of unpaid bills. Her daughter hovered behind, squinting at the blueprint. "Did Grandpa make that?" the girl asked, chewing her thumbnail. A long pause. The mother's mouth moved, but words didn't come. Instead, she folded the drawing, slid it into her bag, and snapped the wooden box shut with a quiet finality. The heaviness of history pressed against her shoulders, thick as the rain. From the doorframe, a familiar slip of paper peeked out. A utility bill, 4 months overdue, edges curled. She tucked it in her coat, fingers numb from the cold. Her daughter climbed into an exam chair, legs swinging, humming under her breath. The hum bounced off the tiled walls, the soft echo of lost patience, years when the clinic had been full. Her father's laugh, the jangle of his keychain, the tap of his pen against the clipboard. Now only ghosts and echoes. The rain slowed, settling into a persistent drip from the gutter. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and steady. The woman set the box back onto the shelf, the doctor's necklace still clutched in her palm. Bills, boxes, and broken machines. What did it add up to? A car horn blared outside. She checked her watch. In an hour, the bus would come to take her across town for the night shift at Amazon. Another midnight sorting line. Another night spent wondering if the bank would take the building before she could find a way out. Her daughter's voice, softer now. "Is it worth anything, Mom?" She looked around, at the leaky ceiling, at the framed photo of her father in his lab coat, at the stack of unopened mail and the lunchbox ready for another long night. She breathed in the smell of rubbing alcohol and rain-soaked carpet. "Probably not," she murmured, almost to herself. "But it's all we've got." The overhead bulb flickered once, twice. She pulled the sketch from her bag, smoothing it flat on the counter. The device, whatever it was, looked like no medical tool she'd ever seen. Tubes, gears, tiny notations in red ink. A patient's name, nearly erased by a spill. The box creaked as it closed, echoing in the empty room. She slid her father's necklace back into her pocket. Heart pounding. Out on the street, the rain had finally stopped. The world glistened in the streetlight's afterglow. Clinic windows streaked with memory, city buses rumbling through puddles, a single mom clinging to what little was left. A plastic lunchbox, a wooden box, a necklace, a secret drawing. Somewhere, hidden between debts and broken things, something waited to be discovered. And as the woman turned out the lights, the sound of the box's lid, old wood groaning, lingered long after she'd locked the door. The clinic was cold in the morning, sunlight angling through dusty blinds, striping the floor in faded gold. She spread her father's sketch on the reception desk, smoothing the wrinkles with careful, steady hands. The lines of the device seemed clearer by daylight. Circles, arrows, scribbled notes in blue ink. Some kind of invention. Maybe a way out. She set her coffee on the edge of the desk, watching steam rise and dissipate. Her daughter sat cross-legged on the floor, cradling a plastic dinosaur, humming quietly. In the silence, the sound of the mail slot snapped, a small envelope thumping onto the cracked linoleum. She waited a beat before picking it up, eyes tracing the return address. The same legal aid office she'd called last week. No help, just a form letter. She tossed it onto the pile. With a deep breath, she unlocked her phone, thumb hovering over the browser icon. Government patent websites, instructions, legal forms. The words blurred together. Prior art, utility claim, fee schedule. She clicked Begin Application. The site loaded, slow and stuttering, her old phone struggling under too many open tabs. She typed her father's name, the sketch's details, the worn list of numbers from the back of the blueprint. Next, upload the drawing, enter her address. Her hands shook. She checked her bank balance. $201. Rent was due in 5 days. The application fee blinked on the screen. $175. She closed her eyes. The clinic's silence pressed around her. Refrigerator clicking on, distant cars passing. Her thumb hovered over Submit. There was nothing else to sell. Her credit cards maxed. The pawn shop already held her father's watch and her own wedding ring. She clicked. The money vanished. That night, at the Amazon warehouse, her plastic lunchbox sat atop a pile of brown boxes. She slipped away during her break, standing under a flickering fluorescent, her fingers red and raw from cardboard cuts. She opened her phone again, checking her email. Refresh, nothing but spam. Her feet ached. She thought about the device, the hope it represented, and how quickly hope could turn into debt. 2 days later, the first letter arrived, postmarked from a law firm in Connecticut, a Meditrix letterhead. She slid it open with a box cutter. Cease and desist. Paragraphs of legalese, threatening damages, criminal liability, the usual list of what they'd do if she didn't withdraw her patent application immediately. She dropped the letter on the lunchroom table, plastic surface pocked with cigarette burns. Her daughter, home with the neighbor, sent a picture. The pizza place's sign, bright red. Friday pizza, Mom. The memory of their tradition. Extra cheese, coins counted out on the counter, paper plates, flickered, distant now. She stared at her ATM app. $47, $1 more than last week, but only because she'd skipped breakfast shifts at the clinic. In the darkness of the warehouse, pallet jacks rattled over concrete. She leaned against a stack of boxes, phone pressed to her ear. Meditrix's customer service line rang, then routed her to a lawyer, then to another, then to an extension with a mechanical voice. Leave your name, patent number, case file. We'll respond in order received. She hung up. Her daughter's text blinked on her phone. No pizza again. Her throat tightened. She pulled out the faded note her father had tucked in the wooden box. Half a patent number, never registered, the ink smudged by time and sweat. Maybe he'd tried to do what she was doing now. Maybe he'd failed. Days blended together. Warehouse shifts, clinic cleaning, school drop-offs. At night, she lay awake. Bills stacked on her nightstand, the doctor's necklace cold in her fist. She replayed the sound of her daughter's voice. They stole his work, and now threaten me. No answer came. Late Sunday night, her inbox pinged. The subject line, immediate action required, cease application. The sender, Meditrix Legal Department. She clicked the link. The email, clinical and direct, glowed in the blue light. Cease immediately or face court. Failure to comply will result in further action. She looked at the wooden box on her dresser, at the sketch now tucked into her daughter's math folder for safekeeping, at the necklace still warm from her hand. She pulled her knees to her chest, feeling the tremor of fear, of defiance, of exhaustion building beneath the surface. Downstairs, the fridge motor hummed, steady as a heartbeat. She stared at her phone until the screen dimmed, then tucked it under her pillow. The night stretched long, broken by the distant rumble of a train and the promise, threat, of what tomorrow would bring. Outside, the first birds called, invisible in the pre-dawn dark. The email from Meditrix burned in her mind, each word a warning and a line she refused to cross. She pressed her father's necklace to her lips, breathing in old memories, new resolve. Something in her shifted. She was too tired to run, too broke to quit. If they wanted a fight, she'd give them one, but not on their terms. The city woke slowly, buses sighing, rainwater trickling through gutters, the world moving forward. In the silent clinic, a mother and daughter clung to what little remained. And somewhere, the idea of her father's invention waited, stubborn and unfinished, for someone willing to carry it forward. Monday arrived gray and listless, dew fogging the clinic's glass. She sipped weak coffee at the reception counter, balancing a battered laptop between stacks of forms. Her daughter, bundled in a too-small hoodie, traced lines on a rain-speckled window with a finger, spelling out invisible words. The letter from Meditrix still sat on the counter, creased and fingerprinted. She'd hidden it from her daughter, sandwiched between coloring books and insurance claims. She thought of shredding it, burning it, anything to erase the words. Withdraw, damages, criminal prosecution. Instead, she opened her laptop and began to write. Her message was direct, maybe too blunt. She addressed it to the CEO of Meditrix, the name printed in bold at the bottom of their threats. She wrote about her father, the years he'd poured into the clinic, the device she believed was his original work. She attached photographs of the sketches, a scan of the half-registered patent note, even a picture of her father's old doctor's necklace lying on the desk, as if it could confer legitimacy by its presence. She finished with a plea. This device could save lives for families like mine. Please, don't take this from us. She read it over twice, then hit send. The email zipped away, lost in the void. A dull peace settled in her chest. She let herself hope for an answer, just a little, a call, a meeting, an honest review. For the next few days, she moved through routines with a cautious optimism. Lunchbox packed, bills sorted, clinic scrubbed from top to bottom. She and her daughter ate soup from cans and watched cartoons on the laptop, wrapped in a blanket too small for both. One afternoon, as she mopped the exam room, her phone buzzed. An email. Your request for review is being processed. You will receive an update within 90 days. 3 months. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the medicine cabinet. That was how hope worked. Strung out, delayed, never promised. She circled the date on a ripped page from her daughter's notebook and set it on the fridge with a cracked magnet. A week passed. The city carried on. Bus brakes squealing, birds swooping down in puddles, the distant rumble of highway trucks. She rode the bus home each dawn, warehouse aches still burning in her shoulders, her plastic lunchbox sticky with spilled coffee. One morning, as she waited at a red light, she glanced up at a billboard she'd passed 1,000 times. Today, the billboard was new, a brilliant blue ad for Meditrix. Across it, a photo of a shining medical device, unmistakably her father's design, blown up 50 feet high. She nearly missed the green light. At the next stop, she parked the car and stared up at the sign. Coming soon, the ad read, a revolution in affordable health. The sketch in her bag matched the curves of the device, the notched adjustment dial, the ridged grip. Even the name, slightly altered, was there, bold and familiar. A siren wailed in the distance. She squeezed the doctor's necklace in her pocket until the chain cut her palm. That night, at the clinic, her daughter curled up in a plastic chair, homework forgotten. The woman stood at the window, staring at her own faint reflection in the glass, the city's glow throwing long shadows across the empty lobby. On the news, the Meditrix CEO smiled from behind a microphone. Cameras flashed. We care for community health, she announced, polished and certain. This device represents years of research and dedication to serving underserved families. The woman watched in silence. Her knuckles whitened around her father's necklace, the metal cold and stubborn in her grip. The TV's drone filled the space where her father's laughter used to echo. A stack of bills toppled from the counter to the floor. She picked them up one by one, flattening the corners, her jaw tight. Her daughter glanced up, then quietly bent over her homework again, pencil scratching soft and uncertain. Later, she sat alone at the kitchen table, the blueprint and the faded patent note spread out before her. In the hush of the clinic, she tried to imagine a world where justice was more than a word, where someone would listen to a single mother's claim over a billion-dollar corporation's story. The air in the clinic seemed heavier. A truck rumbled past, shaking the windows in their frames. She stared at the sketch until the lines blurred and ran together, then gathered up the documents and placed them gently back in the wooden box. On the television, the Meditrix CEO's voice echoed again. We believe in making health accessible to all. The woman turned off the screen. In the darkness, she sat with the necklace in her hand, the metal warm from her touch. She pressed it to her lips, breathing in old memory and stubborn hope, and prepared herself for whatever would come next. Tuesday morning, fluorescent lights flickered in the clinic's hallway. fighting the weak sunlight struggling through stained blinds. She sat at the battered desk, a phone book open beside her elbow, pages soft with age. Her finger traced the columns. Legal aid, advocacy, public defenders, every number circled in dull pencil. A mug of instant coffee steamed, forgotten, next to her plastic lunchbox. Her daughter, dragging a frayed backpack, sat on the floor sorting loose crayons by color, arranging them into neat, hopeful rows. The stack of mail waited on the counter, silent and threatening. She dialed the first number. A busy tone. She tried the next. A polite but tired voice. "We don't take patent cases that size, ma'am. Too big for us?" She hung up, exhaling through her teeth. Another number. "Sorry, not our area." She crossed out names, the pencil lead smudging the pages. Time crawled. The light above her desk buzzed, a faint electrical whine beneath the drone of passing trucks. By noon, the mug was cold, the crayon rainbow undisturbed. She shut the phone book and stared at the faded photograph of her father, smiling, stethoscope around his neck, clinic door open behind him. She pressed the doctor's necklace to her chest, thumb running over the worn grooves. The front door rattled. A neighbor poked her head in, carrying a grocery bag. "Heard you were looking for a lawyer. Want to come to the Union Hall tonight? Sometimes they bring in volunteers." She nodded, fingers curling around the necklace, the anchor in her pocket. The Union Hall was on the edge of town, an old brick building sagging under its own weight. Inside, folding tables lined the walls, battered chairs scraped over linoleum, coffee urns steaming beside trays of stale cookies. Voices echoed, overlapping in waves. She joined a loose cluster near the stage, her lunchbox tucked under one arm. The meeting started late. A man in a threadbare suit stood at the microphone, clearing his throat. She clutched a folder of documents, knuckles whitening. One by one, people stepped up. Stories of rent hikes, workplace injuries, lost benefits. When her turn came, her knees shook, but she stepped forward, head held high. A rusty microphone stood between her and the crowd. She opened her folder, the patent sketch sliding out. Her voice wavered but carried, bouncing off chipped paint and tired faces. She didn't plead. She told the story as it was. Her father's invention, the sketch, Meditrix's threat, the billboard above the freeway. At the back, a camera crew hovered, bored until her words shifted the air. One reporter lifted a phone, filming quietly. She caught her daughter's eyes in the audience, the small hands gripping her lunchbox tight. Who would believe a single mom over Meditrix? Her words hung in the stale air, longer than she'd meant. Silence. The coffee urn gurgled. Someone coughed. A man in glasses tapped his pen on the table, considering. Reporters scribbled notes. The woman at the microphone gripped the base, voice steadying. She raised the doctor's necklace, letting the light catch its surface, holding it out like an oath. My father believed in this. He built it for patients who couldn't afford care. The chairperson thanked her. She stepped back, heartbeat thudding. Someone offered her coffee. She shook her head. Her daughter squeezed her hand, silent, thumb brushing the silver chain where it dangled from her pocket. The meeting dragged on. Local politicians made promises. The crowd thinned. Outside, the air was cold, streetlights buzzing in pools of amber. The camera crew approached. "Can we get a shot?" the reporter asked, motioning her back inside. She nodded, shoulders squared. Under the harsh lights, the reporter asked questions, voice low and insistent. She answered in short sentences, avoiding words she couldn't afford. Fairness, justice, hope. The camera zoomed in, focusing on the necklace, the sketch, her hands. When they finished, she stood in the empty hall, breathing in the scent of old coffee and floor wax. The rusty microphone echoed in her memory, her voice stretched and thin in the hollow room. Her daughter took her hand. Together they walked out into the parking lot, the world quiet except for the buzz of distant traffic. Above them, a sliver of moon hung behind clouds, faint and steady. The woman slid the doctor's necklace back into her pocket, pressing it close as they crossed the lot, every step sending a small echo through the night. Inside the empty car, she watched the camera crew drive away, taillights vanishing. The necklace, still warm from her grasp, glimmered in the dark. Somewhere, the story had already begun to move beyond her reach. A storm had swept through the city overnight, scattering branches across the street in front of the clinic. She bent to clear a path to the door, rain still dripping from the awning, the scent of wet asphalt rising with each breath. Her daughter, boots squeaking, kicked puddles into rainbow swirls. Above them, clouds peeled away from a faded sunrise, leaving strips of blue like torn cloth. Inside, the phone rang, once, twice, before settling into silence. She pressed the doctor's necklace to her lips before setting her bag on the desk. A stack of newspapers, all recent, was pushed through the mail slot. One headline in bold, "Local Mother Takes on Mediatrix Giant." She shoved them aside, the words feeling distant and foreign. The morning dragged, punctuated by the rattle of the heater and the clatter of a loose window. She sorted patient files, fingers pausing on names she hadn't seen in years. Her daughter drew on the exam table's paper, sketching hearts and spaceships and an unsteady house with a crooked roof. A knock startled her. A man in a gray suit stood in the doorway, badge glinting, holding a heavy envelope. His eyes flickered to the child, then back to her. "Ma'am, I have a summons for you. Federal case filed this morning." She reached for the envelope, hand steady by force. The papers were crisp and official, full of language that circled back on itself. Words she recognized: damages, intent, punitive, court. Mediatrix had filed suit, naming her as defendant. The sum they sought was impossible. Numbers that didn't fit into her world. Millions. The man left. She stared at the papers, the seal of the court sharp and unforgiving at the top of the page. Her daughter tugged at her sleeve. "Can we go to the park today?" She tucked the summons into her lunchbox, next to the peanut butter crackers and a note scribbled in purple crayon. "Maybe tomorrow, honey." That night, the warehouse lights burned like searchlights across the stacks. Pallets groaned, forklifts beeped, and she signed for her shift in the fluorescent glare, hands sticky with sweat. The supervisor barely looked up as she clocked in. Her name on the screen, her uniform pressed and faded, her world shrinking with every hour. A coworker glanced over. "You okay?" She shrugged, shoulders hunched. "Fine, just tired." Halfway through the shift, she slipped into the break room, sliding the lunchbox onto her lap. She opened it, pushing aside the snacks, and pulled out the summons. She stared at the words until they blurred. Her father's sketch, the faded patent note, even the necklace. None of it seemed to matter under the weight of the lawsuit. A drop of water dripped from the ceiling onto her lunchbox, spreading in a dark circle. She closed the box, tucking it beneath her chair, and leaned back, eyes drifting shut. Somewhere, a radio crackled, the song lost under the hum of the vending machines. When her break ended, she rode the bus home, her daughter sleeping on her shoulder, the city blurring past in streaks of sodium yellow. At the last stop, The bus driver called out, "End of the line." She stepped onto the sidewalk, the night air damp and heavy, the summons pressed flat between her hands. She watched the bus pull away, taillights vanishing around the corner. She stood alone on the corner, a single mom holding a lunchbox, a court order, and a story no one believed. By dawn, her apartment was cold. She boiled water for oatmeal, the stove hissing. Her daughter patted in, rubbing her eyes. "Mom, are we going to lose the clinic?" She poured the oats, the spoon clinking against the pot. "I don't know, sweetheart." On the table, the summons stared back at her, the Meditrix logo bold at the top. She pressed the necklace into her palm, the edges biting against her skin. A tremor passed through her, small but insistent. She watched her daughter eat, sunlight sliding across the kitchen floor, and felt the world shift under her feet. The mail carrier knocked, leaving a new stack of envelopes, bills mostly. One addressed in looping blue ink. A note from a neighbor, offering prayers and luck. She read it twice, then tucked it under the magnets on the fridge. The summons went back into the lunchbox, hidden for another day. The city woke, oblivious. Cars rushed by, radios blaring, lives unfolding in 1,000 other kitchens. But in the quiet apartment, the woman sat with her daughter, the weight of what she'd risked settling around her shoulders, heavy as hope, sharp as loss. The next morning, the sky was slate and swollen, rain clouds threatening above the city's rusted rooftops. She stood by the kitchen sink, water running over chipped plates, her daughter humming softly at the table, braiding scraps of ribbon into a necklace for her worn-out teddy bear. The federal summons lay open on the counter beside an untouched bowl of cereal, its official seal glaring up like a dare. She poured the coffee, strong and bitter, hands shaking just enough to spill a few drops on the stove. Her phone buzzed, a message from the Union Hall. "Saw you on the news. Know a lawyer, name's Harris. Call if you want." The name was scribbled in pen. She rinsed her hands, wiped them dry, and dialed. Harris answered on the second ring, his voice flat, businesslike. "Pro bono doesn't mean easy," he said, after she stumbled through her story. "You got anything to prove your dad invented it?" She hesitated, glancing at the wooden box. "Drawings? Notes? Some damaged in a flood? My daughter found the box in the clinic. I need everything. Original sketches, drafts, anything in your dad's handwriting." She gathered it all, crumpled blueprints, napkins with calculations, a torn photograph of her father at his workbench, pen poised above a clutter of tools. Her daughter colored quietly at the corner, eyes darting between her mother and the growing stack of papers. "Anything else?" Harris asked. She reached into her pocket for the necklace, the caduceus charm dull from years of worry. "Just this," she whispered, more to herself than the lawyer. The metal was warm from her touch, heavier than memory. Harris arranged a meeting. The office was cramped and full of boxes, papers piled on every flat surface, windows fogged from rain. She sat on a folding chair, hands in her lap, the lunchbox perched on her knees. He spread the documents across the desk, squinting at faded ink, piecing together a story from fragments. "Device could have changed things for a lot of people," Harris said. "But we need more. Anything official?" She shook her head. "A half-registered patent. My dad never had the money to finish." The door creaked. A woman entered, gray hair in a bun, wire-rimmed glasses slipping down her nose. She introduced herself as Dr. Alvarez, a medical professor from the State University. Harris had called in a favor, someone who could explain the technical side, make sense of the device's strange configuration. They worked late into the evening. Dr. Alvarez traced the lines on the blueprint, her breath fogging the paper. "Your father was onto something," she murmured, voice barely above the whir of the heater. "But these water stains, whole sections are unreadable." Her daughter, bored and fidgeting, folded napkins into cranes, setting them along the windowsill. Outside, headlights washed across the rain-spattered glass, casting shadows in the cramped room. Harris packed up the box, careful with the delicate pages. "We'll submit everything we've got. If Metatrix stole your dad's design, we'll show it. But the court wants proof. Originals, witness statements, clear dates. We might not get a second chance." She nodded, clutching the necklace so tightly the links pressed crescent moons into her palm. The day of the hearing arrived cold, the wind biting as she led her daughter up courthouse steps slick with drizzle. Inside, the building hummed with low voices and the squeak of shoes on marble. The federal courtroom was vast, ceilings lost in shadow, an American flag draped behind the judge's bench. Lawyers in dark suits shuffled papers, faces set in careful masks. She sat with Harris and Dr. Alvarez at a polished table, the wooden box of documents resting between them. Her daughter waited outside with a neighbor, sketchbook in hand. The judge entered, his robes trailing, gavel banging once, sharp as thunder. "Proceed with evidence," he ordered. Harris laid out the manuscripts, photos, and patent notes, every document a small offering. Dr. Alvarez explained the device's potential, voice steady, gestures economical. Across the aisle, Metatrix's lawyers murmured, shuffling thick files, their suits immaculate, their eyes cool. The judge asked questions. The court clerk took notes. Everything felt slow and enormous, every detail magnified. The wooden box, her father's box, sat open on the evidence table, its contents fragile and exposed beneath the courtroom lights. She sat upright, hands folded, necklace visible at her collar, listening to the legal ritual unfold. Her knees bounced beneath the table. She could smell the cleaning fluid, the cold air circulating, the faint tang of metal from the judge's desk. A recess was called. She stepped into the hallway, lungs tight. The world felt distant, a blur of suits, echoing heels, and the faint sound of her daughter's laughter drifting from the waiting area. Inside, the judge's gavel sounded again. The next phase was set to begin. Her father's legacy balanced on the sharp edge of proof. The courtroom held its chill even as the sun climbed higher outside, yellow stripes of morning sneaking through narrow windows and casting slantwise shadows on the floor. She sat still, jacket buttoned to the neck, her father's doctor's necklace gleaming just beneath the collar. Small, easy to miss, yet stubbornly present. Harris leaned forward, stacking their documents with careful precision, while Dr. Alvarez murmured over her notes, lips pressed thin. Metatrix's legal team arranged themselves at the opposite table, their briefcases glossy, watches synchronized, every gesture rehearsed. At the center, a tall man in an expensive suit checked his phone, then rose as the judge entered, robes sweeping. "All rise," called the bailiff. The room rose and settled, shoes scuffing, a cough echoing. The judge's gavel rang. Her heart answered it with a soft, steady drum. Harris stood. "Your Honor, our case rests on evidence of original design, dated sketches, and expert testimony confirming the device's feasibility. We call Dr. Alvarez." Dr. Alvarez approached the stand, her steps measured, eyes clear behind her glasses. She held the wooden box in both hands, setting it gently on the rail. This device, Your Honor, is unique. The design predates Meditrix's patent application by several years. Some notes are water damaged, but the core mechanism remains visible. The judge nodded, examining the blueprints, fingers tracing faded ink. The Meditrix attorney cleared his throat, standing to object. The so-called evidence is incomplete, easily forged, and the device itself? Impossible by current standards. We call our expert witness. A man in a crisp lab coat took the stand, silver hair brushed flat, voice carrying with cool authority. This prototype, as presented, cannot function as claimed. No peer-reviewed study supports its operation. Murmurs rolled through the courtroom. Harris pressed his palms flat to the table, then signaled for her. She hesitated. Her hands twisted the necklace, metal warm from her skin. She looked to the gallery. Her daughter, feet dangling above the floor, sketchbook in her lap, watched with wide, unmoving eyes. Would the applicant's family like to provide testimony? The judge asked. She stood, smoothing her skirt, nerves crackling beneath her skin. She moved to the front, hands clenched at her sides. I watched my father work on this device, she began, voice low, the room falling quiet. He believed it would help patients who had nothing left. No insurance, no hope. He tested it on weekends here in the clinic. I remember the smell of solder, the hum of the old generator, the notebooks stacked on the kitchen table. He made sketches on napkins when he ran out of paper. I watched him fail again and again, but he kept going. Meditrix's attorney interrupted. No physical prototype has been provided. She opened her purse, pulling out a battered cloth pouch. She unwrapped it, revealing the necklace, her father's, old silver dulled by time, and laid it gently on the evidence table. He wore this every day. It's engraved with a date. The week he finished the first working prototype. There are still notes in his handwriting on the back. She handed it to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. A pause. The judge examined the necklace, eyes narrowing at the tiny inscription. Her daughter stood abruptly, sketchbook pressed to her chest. I saw Grandpa test the machine, she said, voice piping through the hush. The courtroom turned. He let me press the button once. It beeped. He smiled. The judge nodded, lips almost softening, then motioned her to sit. Harris placed her father's journals and a half-built prototype, found in a cardboard box in the back of the clinic, onto the table. The judge paged through the journals, holding the prototype up for the expert. Dr. Alvarez approached again, pointing out the unique mechanism, her words patient and steady. No two inventors arrive at this combination by chance. It's his work. The Meditrix team rustled papers, whispering sharply among themselves. One lawyer's pen tapped out a frustrated staccato on his pad. At last, the judge set everything down, hands folded. This court acknowledges the evidence presented. Original sketches, testimonial from immediate family, expert witness, and a partial prototype. The claim of independent invention by Meditrix is, at best, questionable. The room exhaled. Harris sat back, rubbing his eyes. She watched her daughter hug the sketchbook to her chest, small fingers tight at the edges. The judge's gavel sounded again, setting the next steps in motion. A ruling would come, not today, but soon. For now, her father's invention, and everything it stood for, was recognized, if only for a moment, as something real. Verdict day arrived with the late summer heat, air humming with cicadas outside the apartment window. She dressed in silence, hands moving through the motions, pulling her father's necklace over her head. pinning stray hairs, buttoning her shirt with practiced steadiness. Her daughter stood by the door, holding a battered lunchbox and a drawing tucked into her pocket. A stick-figure family, 3 hands linked, standing before a building with a red cross and bright blue windows. The courthouse steps shimmered under the sun, a river of strangers flowing in and out. She climbed them one at a time, daughter at her side, a paper envelope pressed between her fingers. Inside, the last of her clinic's keys rattled softly, a farewell she'd tried to put off until there was nothing left to delay. The hearing room was cool, fluorescent lights buzzing, rows of folding chairs half filled with faces she barely recognized. Neighbors, nurses, patients from old days, a news crew adjusting a tripod in the aisle. Harris met her at the door, his tie askew, eyes tired but determined. Dr. Alvarez offered a small nod, the corners of her mouth almost turning up. Her daughter traced the grout lines in the tile with one toe, whispering a silent song under her breath. The judge entered, black robe sweeping the floor, stack of papers held tight. Everyone rose, then settled. For a moment, the only sound was the whir of the ceiling fan, the shuffling of documents. The judge spoke, a summary of months of filings and depositions, the story of a device lost and found, a mother's fight against the weight of a giant. When the verdict came, it landed not with a bang, but with a sigh. Meditrix was ordered to return the patent, to pay damages, $120 million, the numbers vast and foreign, as if they belonged to someone else's life. There were rules and timelines, appeals to be filed, but the message was clear. Her father's invention, at last, was his again. The courtroom didn't erupt. There was no applause. Instead, she let her breath out, shoulders sinking, the doctor's necklace warm and heavy against her chest. Harris patted her arm. Dr. Alvarez squeezed her hand. Her daughter slipped the drawing into her palm, folding her fingers around it, then pressed her face into her mother's side. Reporters crowded near, microphones extended, questions sharp and insistent. How does it feel? What will you do with the money? Why fight so hard? She answered in fragments, voice steady but thin, speaking of her father, of families who'd waited years for something better. Someone asked about the clinic, if she'd reopen. She shook her head, the keys in her hand rattling a quiet answer. Later, outside the courthouse, sunlight poured down in blinding sheets. She walked to the curb, daughter's hand wrapped in hers, Harris and Dr. Alvarez trailing behind. A news alert buzzed on her phone, a headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Meditrix stock plunges after a $120 million verdict. In a downtown diner, the TV blared the same news, tickers spinning red and blue beneath the footage of the courthouse steps. That evening, they stopped at the old clinic one last time. The neighborhood was quiet, trees heavy with late summer leaves, a stray dog barking somewhere out of sight. She let her daughter unlock the door, the key turning with a soft click. Inside, the air was stale, the rooms empty except for the smell of disinfectant and dust. Sunlight painted patterns on the faded wallpaper. She walked through each room slowly, trailing fingers along the countertops, pausing before the exam table where her father once sat, head bowed in thought. The medical journals were gone, the wooden box empty now except for a single slip of paper. Her father's name, the date he finished the prototype. She left it there, a quiet record. On the desk, she set the clinic keys, her hand lingering over them. For a moment, she stood very still, head high, eyes fixed on the spot where her father's photo once hung. Then, gently, she turned away. Her daughter skipped ahead, lunchbox swinging, sunlight glinting off the metal latch. The woman followed, pausing in the doorway to look back one last time. Dust motes danced in the golden air. The past, she thought, was not something you could carry forever, no matter how tightly you held on. Outside, the sky was a hard, clean blue. Cars passed on the street. A distant siren faded away. A bus rumbled by with its windows open, people leaning into the breeze. She and her daughter walked down the steps together, every step lighter than the one before. The clinic shrinking behind them, memory and hope tangled together in the bright new afternoon. Fall came early that year, crisp wind tugging red leaves along cracked sidewalks, the air filled with the scent of distant bonfires and fresh paint. She walked to the new clinic each morning with her daughter skipping ahead, lunchbox swinging, hair loose beneath a sky scrubbed clean by rain. The old neighborhood was behind them now, its shadows traded for the bright uncertainty of a new place. The new clinic was nothing like her father's, smaller, a one-story brick building on the corner of a neighborhood where people waited for buses and counted change for groceries. The sign by the door read, "Community Health First," the paint still fresh, letters big and hopeful. Inside, the floor was scuffed linoleum, walls painted in cheerful blue. The waiting room lined with plastic chairs salvaged from a closing school. The smell of disinfectant clung to everything, sharp, clean, insistent. She stood behind the reception window, clipboard in hand, watching patients file in, mothers with toddlers pressed to their legs, an old man wheezing behind his walker, teenagers in worn-out jackets. The line was always there, moving slow, never ending. Her daughter sat in a corner, coloring quietly, offering stickers to children who passed by. The device, her father's invention, sat in the supply closet, not gleaming, but ready. After months of legal wrangling, of signatures and scanned documents and new rules, it finally belonged to them. Harris had helped connect her with a nonprofit, a small team determined to put the device into service for those who needed it most. They arrived one morning with a battered pickup, unloading boxes of supplies, their laughter filling the cramped hallway. The first patient was a boy with wide eyes and tangled hair, carried in by his mother. She saw him hesitate in the doorway, scanning the strange room, gripping her hand so tight his knuckles whitened. The woman knelt, speaking softly, her voice steady as she explained the machine, how it worked, what it could do. The mother nodded, hope flickering in her tired eyes. It took less than 15 minutes. Dr. Alvarez, now volunteering twice a week, monitored the device as it hummed quietly, blinking green and steady. The boy sat perfectly still, eyes closed, hands folded in his lap. The result was almost anticlimactic, a soft beep, a printout, a nod from the professor. The mother cried, silent tears, clutching the boy's shoulders. The woman pressed a tissue into her hand, looking away, pretending to busy herself with paperwork. Her own daughter watched from across the room, eyes shining, a smile breaking slow and wide. That night, they walked home beneath streetlights, the air sharp and sweet. Leaves gathered in the gutters, swirling at their feet. At home, she hung the doctor's necklace on a hook by the door, letting it catch the last of the evening light. The kitchen was small, the fridge humming, but it was theirs. She made dinner with her daughter, laughing when flour dusted their hair, setting 2 plates at the table, the radio playing low. Later, sitting on the worn couch, her daughter curled up beside her. She traced the curve of the new clinic's sign with her finger. The letters looked back at her, community health first, a promise born from struggle stitched together from loss and chance. A letter arrived from Harris, the envelope thick with paperwork. The patent now read her father's name, the nonprofit's logo stamped beside it. She ran her thumb over the embossed seal, then set it under the magnet on the fridge. The keys to the old clinic were gone, but this new place, these new faces, filled a space she hadn't known was empty. She thought about the past, the cold nights, the silent clinic, the ache of losing everything. She thought of the verdict, the headlines, the day she left her father's keys on the desk. Those things lingered, but lighter now. Their weight shifted into something she could carry. Her daughter brought a drawing to the table, 3 figures standing under a bright sun, the new clinic behind them, the doctor's necklace shining like a beacon in the window. She pinned it beside the patent, a small gallery of hope above their kitchen sink. One morning, as the sun rose, she stepped out the door and turned to her daughter. "Ready?" The girl grinned, swinging her lunchbox, her hair wild in the wind. Together they walked toward the clinic, past neighbors waiting for the bus, past the store with the windows taped for winter. The world didn't notice them, just another mother and daughter among many. But she felt a quiet certainty with every step. Sometimes justice means starting over. Sometimes it means finding a way forward with less, building something new from the ruins. The lesson not in victory or defeat, but in the hands that reach out, in the mornings that begin again, and in the promise that her father's work would help others long after his name faded from the news. The first snow arrived late, dusting the city in quiet silver, softening sharp edges, slowing the traffic outside the clinic windows. She watched flakes swirl past the streetlights, drifting down to the curb where a line of neighbors waited, bundled in thrift store coats, hands shoved deep into pockets. The sign on the door, "Community Health First," caught the glow, its paint chipped now but still legible, hopeful as ever. Inside, the morning rush unfolded as always. A mother soothed a coughing toddler, a teenager scrolled through a cracked phone, an old man leaned against the check-in desk with a worn lottery ticket peeking from his shirt pocket. The waiting room was a mosaic of quiet fatigue. Plastic chairs, laminated flyers, a single potted plant determinedly green. She moved through the small rooms, clipboard under one arm, her father's necklace hanging by the door, no longer worn, but framed in a shadow box, the caduceus shining softly behind the glass. Some days she caught herself glancing at it in passing, as if it might whisper advice. She'd let the past rest there, visible but untouchable, a compass in a world that still needed direction. Dr. Alvarez arrived with a thermos of coffee and a stack of new medical journals. They conferred by the exam table, voices low, trading updates on patients, device maintenance, the constant push and pull of paperwork and need. Harris visited when he could, dropping off forms, offering advice about grant applications, always waving to her daughter, who had become the unofficial greeter at the clinic. Beyond the clinic walls, life pressed on. Headlines about Meditrix's fall drifted across the internet. Stock prices dropping, a glossy magazine cover showing the CEO's forced smile, a story about innovation, responsibility, and consequence. She read it once, folded the magazine, then placed it at the bottom of the recycling bin. The real world, she knew, moved in quieter ways, in who got seen, who got medicine, who made it through another week. One afternoon, the line outside stretched past the corner. She stepped out, breath curling in the cold air, offering apologies. Wait times were long, the staff small, but the doors would stay open as late as needed. Faces nodded back, some familiar, some new, all tired, all waiting. Across the street, a mural of clasped hands stretched across a brick wall, paint faded from years of sun and rain. Her daughter came out, shivering in her jacket, pressing a cup of cocoa into her hands. They stood together, silent, watching a boy in a red scarf press his nose to the clinic window, eyes wide with curiosity. Back inside, she tidied the counter, wiped away salt tracked in from boots, adjusted the framed necklace on the wall. A mother left holding a prescription, her child skipping ahead. An old man sat a little straighter, jacket zipped, waiting for the bus. Later, in the staff room, she wrote a new flyer, simple words, bold letters. No one turned away. Community health first. She pinned it beside a cluster of hand-drawn thank you notes, the crayon sunbeams and stick figures crowding together, bright and stubborn. At the bottom of the board, her daughter's old drawing, 3 figures before a shining building, remained, paper corners curled, but colors undimmed. Evenings stretched longer now. Some nights, she closed the clinic in darkness, the street lamps humming, snow settling on the roof. She would pause, keys in hand, looking up at the sign, its letters a little faded, but still promising. The necklace in the window gleamed, a small beacon against the city's cold. Somewhere, far from the clinic, the world kept turning. Policy debates echoed on television. Experts argued in clean studios. Mediatrix's former CEO appeared on yet another glossy cover. But here, change moved in smaller steps. A mother's relief, a neighbor's handshake, a waiting room full of stories not yet finished. On a quiet night, she set a cup of tea by the window, her daughter asleep under a pile of blankets, the radio playing softly. She thought of her father, his steady hands, his laugh, the day he pressed the necklace into her palm, telling her to use it as a reminder, not a burden. Sometimes, she realized, justice wasn't a verdict or a dollar amount. Sometimes it was the chance to begin again, to keep a promise, to offer help with no expectation in return. The necklace caught the lamplight, scattering small reflections across the wall. She watched them flicker, letting the quiet fill the room, and wondered how many others had stood at the same crossroads, forced to choose between work and family, between silence and standing up, between what's lost and what can be made new. Outside, the snow kept falling, gentle and unhurried, covering the city in so